My good brother's brother-in-law likes to spank me. He beats me when I make a mistake, and he beats my good brother when he makes a mistake. So I was so scared that I secretly had a boyfriend, but he found out by accident. That night, he stripped me of my pants, tied me to the bed and asked me, "What's wrong?" Until I cried and begged for mercy, he lightly said, "If you like men, why don't you look for Uncle Junior?" In his first month of school, Franklin got into a fight with his roommate and was called to his parents. It was his brother-in-law, Miles, who came. He waited outside the counselor's office for more than half an hour before Franklin was released. I went up to him and asked him quietly, "Why did you call your brother-in-law for such a small matter?" He drooped his face like a bitter melon. "Don't mention it, our counselor and my uncle know each other." Saying that, he patted my shoulder and handed me a look of self-seeking. Alarm bells were ringing in my brain, and before I could ask any further questions, 2 more people came out from inside. Miles waved me over. "Leo, come here." He looked at the counselor again. "This is Leo, also from my family." The counselor raised an eyebrow. "That's the one." Miles nods. The counselor looked at me, then at Miles, and tapped him on the shoulder meaningfully. "You've got a long way to go, buddy." I was confused and couldn't figure out what they were playing at. I didn't need to speak anyway, so I stood obediently on the sidelines, counting the dots of light on the ground while bellyaching. I don't know what Miles called me here for, to make me stand with him? After a few more brief pleasantries, Miles took me and Franklin away. It was not until we were out of the office building that Franklin dared to speak. "Uncle Junior, can I go then?" Miles nodded. I felt relieved and was about to follow, but I was stopped. "Leo, come with me." My movements froze. I swallowed and gathered my courage. "Uncle, Franklin and I have a class later." "I've asked you to take a vacation." I was in a daze. "There's a club activity?" "I'll ask Franklin to give you the day off." I said, "There's a lockdown at night." "You're not going back to the dorm tonight." "Then tomorrow." "Leo, my patience has its limits." The words that didn't come out of my mouth were swallowed back hard. Just with years of experience, I know that once I go with him, there is absolutely no good end. Taking advantage of the gap between Miles returning the message, I desperately gave Franklin a wink. He mumbled for a few moments and eventually walked back. He opened his mouth and was interrupted before he could speak. "Franklin," Miles walked over to me at some point and yanked me by the collar, carrying me behind him. "I don't suppose you want me to tell your parents all about you." Franklin blushed and handed me an apologetic look. Without waiting for me to respond, he turned and ran. I beat my chest in secret. Franklin, this unreliable guy, why did he just leave me like that? I thought of him as a brother. Miles took me to an apartment near the school. The apartment was not big, but it had all the basic furniture and even necessities ready. My curiosity overcame my fear, and I sat down on the couch. "Uncle, is this also in your name?" He shook his head. "No." After a pause, "To be precise, I bought it, but it's not in my name." At those words, I sat up violently, my mind spinning. He bought it, but put it directly in someone else's name. And it happened to be around our school. Even the furnishings were full of youthfulness. Heart suddenly had a conjecture. "Little uncle, you will not?" I secretly looked at him. His legs are folded together, but a casual glance makes one's heart beat wildly. I suppressed the emotions in my heart and told myself not to be afraid. Gulping, he continued, "Sneaking in a college student, I guess." I looked at him again, only to find that he actually thought about it for a couple of seconds, if at all. Well, that counts. I couldn't stop the smile on his face. I frowned and grunted. "I really didn't expect that at your age, you'd still be playing the hiding a woman in a golden house game." Miles actually nodded his head. "I can't say that I have a golden house, but I do have a hidden treasure." My heart suddenly felt uncomfortable. I couldn't tell what kind of feeling I had. It was just stuffy. I briefly chalked it up to the house. The couch didn't smell good anymore, and I couldn't get enough of the furnishings. The fridge is too small, the decor is too bright, and there's no game room, my favorite. In summary, this house is not good. Not half as good as what Miles got me for my birthday. The mood got a little better, but it was still hard, and I didn't even really want to see Miles. So looked at the ceiling and the floor, just refused to look at Miles. He suddenly laughed out loud. Still happy, Leo? Leo? I pointed at myself incredulously. My mouth said no brain, but my heart suddenly didn't feel bad. On the contrary, I was happy as hell. That's right, who wouldn't be happy to get an extra house for nothing? Only this happiness didn't have time to maintain for a long time. It was broken by Miles himself. He patted the position beside him. Come here, let's calculate the account of this period of time. The smile on his face froze. What score? The one who fought was Franklin, not me, Uncle. You don't know, I've been good for a while. Really? He had a smile on his face, but I knew that underneath it was a belly full of bad intentions. Sure enough, he spoke again. Let's see, who's the one who hasn't answered my phone calls or replied to my messages all this time? His body stiffened and he snorted. It's not just the beginning of the school year. I'm not used to it, and I'm busy with my studies? Oh, then who's the one who's always skipping class? I froze and was about to defend myself, but he interrupted. Leo, you're behind this fight, aren't you? And didn't I tell you not to fall in love early? I subconsciously retorted, but I'm already an adult. Why can't I fall in love? The words came out, but the tone was getting weaker and weaker. The smile on Miles' face had disappeared at some point, and paired with the somber tone, his body revealed a dangerous aura. But, so Leo has someone he likes? Who is it? Tell Uncle Junior. The tone was clearly upturned, but it only gave off a strong oppression. Flattered by the truth that those who know what's good for them are good at what they do, I cleanly admitted my mistake. There's no one I like, Uncle Junior. I'm sorry, I was wrong. While saying that, I came closer, and my whole body was close to lowering my head into the ground. Although Miles didn't eat this, he always changed the topic. What should I do to admit my mistake? Both fists unconsciously clenched, I looked up at him. Can you not this time? He stared at me for a long time and slowly shook his head. I can't. The punishment was over and I flew up from his lap with a humiliated look on my face, not wanting to pay attention to him. He sighed. Leo, for the sake of you growing up, I've spared you from taking off your pants. I snapped my head up at that. You still want to take my pants off? I don't know if it was my accusation that slightly aroused his conscience. He softened his tone. I don't want to hit you either, but think about it. Was it you who disobeyed me in the first place? I thought seriously for 2 seconds, inexplicably feeling a bit weak. The next second and bold. I do not listen to you beat me even if. Why Franklin's share also counted on my head. And I raised my head with an indignant face. Why don't you beat him? He's your nephew. I don't know where that poked his funny bone, but he suddenly inclined his head and let out a deep laugh. Only after a long time did he touch my head, with a meaning in his eyes that I couldn't understand. It's because you're not my own nephew that I'm treating you this way. Because of these words, I was indignant until the next day. Although not related by blood, our two families have been neighbors for as long as I can remember. Before that, Mom and Dad were busy and left me with him. Really, we've spent more time together than he has with Franklin. Well, after all that time together, it's still no match for the bond of blood. I sulked and refused to talk to him even when he drove me back to school. He couldn't see that I was wrong and called out to me when I was getting out of the car. Leo, be good in school, don't fall in love early, okay? The expressionless look, exactly the same as last night when he slowly beat me. The words were swallowed back into my throat, and I only let out an imperceptible Miles smiled imploringly. I shot him a dark look, got out of the car cleanly, slammed the door shut again, and scrambled towards the school like the plague was following me. I was so relieved to be out of Miles' line of sight, but the next moment I ran straight into someone. Jerking back 2 steps, I looked up in a panic. I'm sorry, you didn't? I didn't finish my sentence, but it ended abruptly when I saw the face of the person I hit, and I just stared at him blankly. Until he looked at me worriedly. Leo, are you okay? I realized what I had just done. My face turned red, I didn't know where to put my hands, and I shook my head violently. No, I'm fine. I'm sorry, Hugo. I wasn't looking where I was going and I accidentally bumped into you. Are you okay? It's okay. He smiled at me. Hugo is my classroom assistant and the head of my student council. I fell in love with him the first time I met him. After spending so much time with him, I realized that he is not only good-looking, but also steady and gentle in the world. As a pure little gay, he is simply the man of my dreams. I just suffer from not knowing his sexual orientation and only dare to silently like him. I was busy nodding my head. He laughed softly and suddenly raised his hand. I looked at him apprehensively and expectantly, only to be interrupted by life in the next second. "Leo, what are you doing?" It was Franklin. He ran over to me and pulled me behind him without waiting for me to say anything, then looked at Hugo with a sour face. "What are you trying to do to Leo?" Hugo sniffed and pointed to his shoulder. "Nothing, I just happened to see a fallen leaf on Leo's shoulder." I glanced at it and there it was. Franklin, however, didn't let up. "Leo, why are you so close to him?" "Hugo, I'm warning you, don't try to do anything to Leo." This time did not wait for Hugo to speak. I first couldn't help it. "Franklin, how do you talk? It's me who accidentally bumped into Hugo." "Hugo, he didn't do anything," said while looking apologetically at Hugo. Pulling the obviously uptight Franklin ran to the side. No one else. I just let go and spoke unhappily. "Franklin, why do you have so much malice towards Hugo?" "It's not because of him." "Because of what?" He paused, his face was unable to hide his annoyance. "Oops, forget it, you won't understand even if I say it." I looked at him puzzled, did not wait to argue. He spoke again. "By the way, Uncle did not do anything to you last night, right?" I remembered the tragic situation of last night's frantic screaming. My face darkened, but I still insisted. "No, what could he do to me? He wouldn't even dare to do anything to me." Franklin nodded fervently. "That's right, you've been Uncle Junior's favorite since he was a kid." I was puzzled, not understanding why he would say that. But on second thought, it's true. I remember once in kindergarten when I got into a fight with someone and couldn't find my parents, so I told the teacher about his number. Since then, he's been the one who comes to all the parent-teacher conferences. Because of his support for me, I was a famous bully in elementary and middle school, and no one dared to mess with me. It is the discipline, also from my first year of high school. Only in private. Thinking of this, I glanced indignantly at Franklin and looked at the sky speechlessly. God knows I've only scratched the surface of how much humiliation my ass has actually endured. It's just that I can't say this to Franklin. If he knew I was still getting beat up by Miles at my age, he'd laugh at me. With that in mind, I digressed. "Have you moved into your new dorm yet? I heard you were back just as I was finishing up, so I thought I'd help you move in for fear that you'd go back on your own. By the way, what floor is your new dormitory on?" I said, "I don't have a new dormitory." I said, "I don't have a new dorm." He was shocked. "The counselor didn't set you up? Bad, bad, bad. It can't be because I'm the only one who did it, so he doesn't know about your grudge, right? Now you're the only one left in the dormitory, they'll bully you to death." The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. He ran forward majestically. "No, I have to go and tell the counselor about it." Seeing that he was really going to go, I quickly grabbed him. Wait, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I paused and looked at him. I was about to say something and then I stopped, and then I wanted to say something. I hated myself for finding such a topic. "Come on, what's going on?" He prodded. I gritted my teeth. "Uncle Junior got me a walk-in." "That's fine, but..." He frowned. "Your house is so far away from here, and if you go to school every day, what time do you have to get up at 8 a.m.? You'll be exhausted." He thought seriously. "No, I'd better go to the counselor to see if you can arrange for the two of us to be in the same dormitory." "No, I won't get tired." I paused. "My brother-in-law found me an apartment in the neighborhood." Silence, silence. The silence was deafening. I cover my ears. The next second, Franklin let out a horn. After calming Franklin, who was once again wondering if he was his own nephew, I parted ways with him to go to the student council's office. I've been busy wrapping up the orientation party for the past few days, and basically went over there whenever I had some free time. There wasn't much left to do, and after dealing with it, someone suggested going to a bar for a reunion in the evening, and when asked, I shook my head. I'm not going, my little uncle won't let me go to a bar. The officer of the same department was shocked. No way, Leo, you are an adult, not to mention your brother-in-law. Even your parents can't control you like this, right? I subconsciously wanted to retort, but then I realized that I hadn't said anything. Yes, I'm already an adult. Why do I have to listen to him for everything? If he says I can't go to a bar, I can't go? If he doesn't let me fall in love, I won't? Thinking about last night's humiliation, the resistance intensified. That's why I won't. The bar we went to wasn't quite what I expected. There were no crowds of men and women, more just gathering to drink and talk and play games. Being a non-celebrity and not having had much to drink, I was defeated early on. Drunkenly crooked in the corner, but suddenly sat next to a person. Under the dim light, he sat at the junction of light and shadow, unable to see his face. I subconsciously murmured, Uncle? The next second he came closer. What did you say? It's Hugo. Suddenly reacting to the fact that I had called him someone else's name, I shook my head in panic. Nothing. To hide my panic, I picked up a glass of wine from the table and was about to drink it, only to be stopped halfway through. Hugo snatched the glass from my hand and drank it in one gulp before looking at me, slightly hooking his lips. You've had quite a lot to drink, any more is going to be difficult. Under the alcohol anesthesia, it was as if my brain had stopped thinking, and I only nodded dumbly. He suddenly laughed out loud and stared straight at me. Leo, aren't you curious as to why, of all the people, I only came to you? I shook my head. Why? Because... He jerked closer, close enough to feel each other's breath. I like you. The alcohol went to my head and my brain sobered up. I backed away without moving and lowered my eyes again. My senior crush confessed to me and I didn't seem very happy about it. I looked over at him in confusion. Drunk as he was demonic and wanton, but his heart was surprisingly calm. A figure appeared suddenly in my brain, overlapping with the figure in front of me and separating a little. Eyelids fluttered, I panicked and pushed away the person in front of me. The force of the fall drove the couch to move, making a loud noise. The people playing games and drinking on the side looked towards this corner that was originally uninvited. Hugo smiled. Sorry, I didn't stand still just now, let's continue playing. The crowd averted their gazes at that and I mumbled for a moment, sorry. He laughed softly and came closer, which I dodged again. The smile on his face freezes for a moment and immediately returns to normal, sighing softly, Leo, can't you just give me a little chance by rejecting me so quickly? No. No rejection. I waved my hand in panic. Then it's a yes? The person in front of me smiled softly and resumed that warm look. My heart started beating hard again, but my brain felt like it was tangled in a mess. Only the remnants of consciousness told himself, the longtime crush of the person also liked themselves, such a good thing, what is the reason to refuse? And Miles? I narrowed my eyes. I thought he wouldn't let me fall in love? I'm just going to talk to him. With this thought, I raised a smile and heaved my head twice. From that night on, I started an underground affair with Hugo. After all, not everyone is accepting of homosexuality, let alone Hugo being the man of the hour at school. It would be a bad influence on him if word of our relationship got out after all. School was inconvenient during the weekdays, and the most we could do was to hang out together after school. It's just that during this period of time, as Uncle Junior came to the apartment more and more often, the time I spent with Hugo became shorter and shorter. On our 30th day together, Hugo's patience reached its limit. I looked at the man whose eyes were red with anger and agreed to go out with him for a day on our 30th day anniversary. In order not to be punished by Miles, I lied and said it was a club activity. Just a little couple out inevitably drank a little wine. Before parting is also difficult to part. Wine breath, late at night, moonlight, in front of the house. Everything seems to be the time. He slowly lowered his head. But when he was about to touch, I deviously inclined my head away. Hugo moved and laughed twice on my shoulder. Sorry, Leo, I was in a hurry. I shook my head and he backed away again, just straightening my collar and turning away without a word. Subconsciously wanted to call out to him, but my mouth was so stupid that I didn't know how to speak, so I could only stare stupidly at his back. Until I don't know how long passed, his back disappeared at the end. I turned around, but was met with a pair of sunken eyes. I was so shocked that I took half a step back and spoke hastily, "Uncle Junior." He gave me a cold look, "Go home." As soon as I entered the door, blackness suddenly fell before my eyes. A sense of weightlessness suddenly struck me, and then I reacted to being pressed against my legs and slapped heavily against my butt. For the sake of looking good, I wore my pants thin. A slap down, the pain suddenly rushed to the brain. Subconsciously wanted to break free and escape, but was firmly trapped in that square inch. Not waiting to react, another slap fell. Accompanied by Miles' angry voice, "You know you're wrong?" Pain and drunkenness hit his head together, and his retort came out without thinking, "I'm not wrong." "You're right. Miles, I'm an adult. What's wrong with me wanting to fall in love? What's wrong with me having a crush on someone? Why you hitting me like this? We don't have anything to do with each other." "What? Why?" Miles looked like he was pissed off and laughed. His tone was gloomy like I've never heard before. I was suddenly scared, and without waiting for me to say anything, he suddenly picked me up in his arms. The benefits of a small house were evident at this moment, and in just 2 steps he brought me to the bedroom and threw me heavily on the bed again. My body bounced off the mattress and into the air, and was pressed back onto the bed by my wide body. In the next instant, I was flipped over easily by Miles, and a rush of coolness washed over me. I suddenly realized what Miles was trying to do and reached out to pull my pants back up. Instead, my wrists were firmly clasped, and I was mercilessly picked up again, pulling my wrists above my head. There was something binding both wrists, making it impossible to move. But in the space of a breath, I was reduced to a fish on a knife board. At this point, what manhood, what resistance was thrown to the side. Opening his mouth was to admit his mistake. "Uncle Junior, don't. I'm wrong, I'm really wrong." But he put his hand on top of his skin and rubbed it twice. "Is that so? Then, Leo, tell me, where did you go wrong?" I panicked and was about to open my mouth, but he gagged me again. "Leo, think about it, 1 mistake, 1 slap." 7. I don't know how long it took. My ass seemed to be slightly red and swollen, and I couldn't guess why Miles was angry. "Oh, I don't know, I really don't know. Don't hit it, Uncle Junior, please." With tears in my eyes, I cocked my head at Miles. Sobbing, I said, "It hurts." In fact, it didn't hurt that much. Miles hit me every time, but always controlled the force. Letting me learn from my mistakes, but not letting me feel so much pain. It's just that every time before, it was through my pants, and this time he did what he said he would do. I don't know how many times I've answered, and I don't know how many times I've been wrong. Over and over again, it was numb and itchy there, and a little bit of pain flared up when the wind blew. It was as if something had gotten out of control. It's a good thing that since I was a child, the one thing Miles couldn't watch was me shedding tears. Sighing at his words, he lightly said, "If you like men, why don't you look for Uncle Junior?" When this came out, all the pretending to be pitiful, all the apologizing and begging for forgiveness were forgotten, and I only felt ridiculous. "What's the use of me looking for you? Are you able to help me chase someone?" Slap. A slap fell hard. It hurt more than any time before. "What did Leo say?" "Little uncle didn't hear you. Say it again, huh?" Obviously inquiring tone, but it was threatening. Knowing the time, I shut my mouth in frustration. I let Miles say whatever he wanted to say, but I didn't open my mouth to say a single word. Saying more is more wrong. "I won't talk anymore. Let's see what other reasons you have to hit me." Perhaps the expression of anger was too obvious. Miles sighed and got up to leave. When he came back again, it was without a word that he gently pressed on the slightly red flesh. His hands are coated with ointment, and when he touches them, a coolness comes from them. I didn't hold back the cowering, and was again pressed in place by him. "Good boy, rubbing it away won't hurt anymore." After getting used to it, the coolness became comforting and I closed my eyes to enjoy Miles' service, not holding back a grunt. By the time I realized it was too late to close my mouth, Miles let out a deep chuckle. I gasped, "What are you laughing at?" "Okay, Okay, no more laughing, no more laughing. I said that, but the smile on my face didn't shrink at all. I simply turned my head away and didn't look at it. As the sky darkened, it was pitch black under the window. Behind me, a wide hand rubbed me gently, and I was on the verge of falling asleep. Clothes were gently put on and slowly covered again. Miles ambles over and stops in front of me. Breath hitting his ear, he sighed softly, "If there's anything you need in the future, come to Uncle Junior, okay?" Fuzzy from sleep, I subconsciously muttered back, "What's the point of telling you I like men? It's not like you'll like me." "Who says I won't?" A low voice rang from the ears, ruffling the eardrums and heart beating at the same frequency. "Leo, don't you understand?" He gently moved closer and dropped a kiss on his earlobe. "I like you." The heart thumped, messing with the frequency. Drowsiness was driven clean away at once, but I didn't dare to open my eyes. The person in front of me laughed softly and slowly left. It wasn't until the door slammed shut that I shuddered and squinted. Confirming that there was no one else, I covered my chest and gasped for air. My head felt like a gluey, sticky mess that I couldn't make sense of, only remembering repeating Miles' words. He said, "I like you. Uncle Junior, Miles, likes me." When I got up the next day, Miles hadn't left and had made me breakfast as usual and was taking me to school. I kept my head down and didn't look at him, nor did I mention yesterday's words. However, Miles didn't want to hide. He looked at me with a smile on his face. "How was it yesterday?" He looked at me with a smile on his face. "How about what I said yesterday? Do you want to do it?" I said vaguely, "What did you say yesterday?" "I fell asleep and didn't hear you." I thought that Miles' nature would be able to fool me for a while, but he laughed softly. "It's okay, I'll say it again then. I, Miles, like you." Splat! The chopsticks fell straight down. I bent over in a panic, and again he took hold of my wrists and placed them back on the table. He placed the chopsticks in front of himself in front of me. "I haven't used them yet." Saying that, he lowered his body again to pick up the chopsticks that fell by my feet, and when he got up, he accidentally touched my pants leg. I cringed violently, even my hands stopped. I didn't look up, but I felt his eyes pinned firmly on my body. After a long time, he sighed, "Leo, you don't have to be so afraid of me." With that, he touched my head. The head unconsciously lifted up, right into his line of sight. "I can give you time to think it over, but don't make me wait too long. Give me your choice in a month at the latest, okay?" I nodded. The next second, the words changed, "But that little boyfriend of yours," split. Adversity setting in, I opened my mouth to retort, only to be blocked by a light glance from him. "It's for your safety, Hugo. It's not as simple as you think." "So, they know each other?" The thought, and I asked. Miles, however, wouldn't say anything and only moved on to another topic. I bristled. "If you don't tell me, someone else can tell me." I just didn't expect that even Franklin would keep their relationship a secret. "Franklin, Jelly, just tell me, how did your brother-in-law and Hugo meet?" Franklin shook her head firmly. "If you want to know, go ask my uncle." I choked. I couldn't stop myself from being curious, so I said, "The latest game console." Franklin's eyes wavered. I gritted my teeth again. "The top-of-the-line version." Franklin's demeanor loosened. "Plus that keyboard you were looking at a while back." "Deal." Franklin simply agreed, obviously achieved the purpose, but I was a heart attack, cursing Miles. If he hadn't brought it up without telling me and whetting my appetite, I wouldn't have been able to make such a big investment. I sighed and looked at Franklin with interest. "Now tell me, how did your brother-in-law and Hugo meet?" Franklin cleared his throat and looked around furtively to make sure no one was there before he lowered his voice. "Hugo is my fourth grandfather's illegitimate son. He was just brought back a while ago and is competing with my little uncle for the family fortune. It is rumored that Franklin's fourth grandfather was always an asshole, and if it wasn't for Miles' success, he would have been expelled from the family tree long ago. I just didn't expect that after all these years, there would still be such a big bastard son who would come to compete with Miles for the family fortune." I lowered my eyes, and then? What then? I snapped my head up, only to see Franklin spread his hands innocently. "There was no then, That's all I know. I realized at once that I had been tricked by Franklin. Looking at the increasingly indulgent smile of the man in front of me, my fists hardened at once. Just before I could hammer on it, a voice suddenly came out, "Leo." The arc of Franklin's mouth flattened a little, and I pressed down on his body that was about to rush forward, turned around and smiled at the visitor, "Hugo." When I finished, I tilted my head to look at Franklin. "You go first." "But..." "Go." He gave me a look, but he couldn't argue with me after all. But before he left, he bumped into Hugo's shoulder. I was helpless and held my forehead. "Don't worry about him, he is just a child." Hugo rubbed his shoulder and said, "It's okay." He said, "It's okay." He came up to take my hand, but I dodged him. "Leo?" He questioned, and it took me a while to build up my mind before I looked at him. "Hugo, I've been thinking about it, and I think it's best if we split up." "Separate?" Hugo's expression was suddenly gloomy, but in a few moments, he returned to his normal self. "Why?" Seeing his instantaneous change of face, I seemed to have a little concept of the uncomplicated in Miles' mouth. I lowered my eyes. "It just doesn't feel right." "Inappropriate." He laughed softly. "Is it inappropriate or is it because of, well, Miles' threat?" My head snapped up. He still had that warm look on his face, but it was like I could see the thick malice under his skin. What a shame. I thought Leo would be sweet with me for a while longer. But that's okay. At the very least, it shows me that Miles really cares about Leo. He suddenly came closer, his warm breath exhaling on his face, but it was as if he had been wrapped around a snake, cold and mysterious. But in the next instant, he withdraws again, smiling at me detachedly, with a little gloating hidden in his voice. "Leo unexpectedly do not like me. I am so sad, just I really like Leo. After that, if you need, you can always find me. Oh." He left with a flourish, and I frowned as I stared at his back, unable to figure out what the hell he was thinking. Just before the day was over, I realized what need he was talking about. The midterm exam was coming up. The exam was just in time for the teaching assessment and the school was riveted on it. Students who failed would even get a demerit or a warning. The moment I learned the news, Franklin and I glanced at each other with a tacit understanding. No matter what, we two small party vegetables. 2 months is nothing to learn. From that day on, we started our midterm blitz. It's just that college knowledge is so obscure and difficult to understand that it's already distracting. Not to mention Hugo's coercion all day long. Although he did not say, "I know what he is playing." Doesn't he just want me to come to his door and beg him, so that he can spill some of Miles' little secrets? Oh, dream on. I simply went back to my apartment as soon as I got out of class, not giving him a chance to meet me. The midterm exam was coming up. I looked at the red test papers of the past years, thought about it, and knocked on the door of Miles' bedroom. He must have just gotten out of the shower, wearing a bathrobe with water dripping down from the ends of his hair. The collar of his shirt was wide open, and you could still see his bare pecs and abs. I silently glanced at my flat stomach. Eyes closed. No climbing is my credo. Having seen enough of my reaction, Miles raised one eyebrow. "Leo is figuring it out?" I choked. But avoiding answering, he burrows through the gap beside him and sits straight down at his desk. "Uncle Junior, can you teach me?" I stared straight at him, and in order to gain sympathy, I even put 2 drops of eye drops before coming. Now that I purposely opened my eyes wide, the soreness forced tears down my face along with the residual eye drops. I blinked my eyes. "Uncle, I don't want to fail the course." He stared at me for a long time and slowly walked in. The line of sight from the table full of books, and slowly moved to my face. His coarse fingers wiped away the tears a little bit. I stared at him pitifully. My heart was happy, stable. But did not wait for the joy to finish. He spoke again. "But Leo, why should I help you?" I froze, not expecting this reaction from him. Before, when I wanted something, as long as I put on a pitiful face and begged a few times, he would always say yes. "Because you are my brother-in-law?" "No, Leo, I'm Franklin's brother-in-law, not yours." "But you've always helped me before." "Yes, I helped you before because I wanted to, but not now." You're considering my advances while you're doing it. You're considering my quest without giving me an answer while you're coming to me to ask me to help you. He looked at me fixedly. Leo, don't you think you're being overbearing? You're an adult world. Everything has a price, and you? He laughed softly away. What can you pay me for? Boyfriend status or… Before the words were finished, I stood up with a brainwave and lifted my head up to go over to him. With a bark sound, my lips touched his still warm face, and then left in an instant. I looked over at him. Is this payment okay? He froze, and his eyes looked a little dull. Only after a long time did he smile helplessly. Leo, you just know I won't give it up. So you're saying yes? He rubbed my head. Yes, kid. With Miles' help, the midterm wasn't too good, but it was still a decent grade. Especially after seeing Franklin being taken away by the professor who was known for his strictness, I breathed a long sigh of relief. After my spirit relaxed, many things that I had deliberately ignored before came back to my mind. I suddenly remembered what Miles had said that day. I didn't say anything at that time, but I clearly knew in my heart that I just ate him up for not letting go. When I think about it, I'm kinda bad. Knowing that he liked me seemed to explain everything that had happened before. The first time he disciplined me and spanked me, it was because he saw the love letter I wrote. That was the first time I'd ever seen him that angry. The person who didn't even blink when I smashed a 100-year-old antique before, for the first time he was angry and red-eyed. Now that I think about it, I'm afraid that's when he had his mind set on it. Even later, time and time again, the inexplicable conversation between him and the counselor and this set of houses. All because he liked me. But I refused to mention it, refused to say yes. Even went so far as to make him do all sorts of things for me like he used to, on the strength of his liking. But there was one thing wrong with what he said. I've never had it right. There are so many grudges in the big families. I didn't know how much he really liked or how long his liking for me would last. That's why I didn't want to poke the window paper at first, and then I also tried over and over again. So all this time, I was content to enjoy Miles's undivided attention and refused to agree to his advances. But after trying for so long, I felt it was enough. I jerked up and saw the time on my watch rest. I closed my eyes again. Then I'd wait until I got up tomorrow to tell him. Only I didn't expect to get up the next day, but he was long gone, leaving only a note telling me that something had come up recently and he had to go back over to the old mansion. I sighed, but there was nothing I could do, so I could only obediently pack up my things and go to school. But as soon as I arrived at school, I realized that many unfamiliar students around me were pointing at me. I couldn't make sense of it, but instinctively felt that something was wrong. This instinct was confirmed when I saw Marcus, my former roommate, 11. After being beaten up and educated by Franklin, every time he saw me during this period of time, he would walk away quickly. Today, he stopped, looked me up and down, and snickered, "Yo, ain't that Leo? Disgusting faggot." I frowned. "Marcus, what do you want again?" He gave me a scornful look. "Now the whole school knows that you're a disgusting homosexual and that you're a watery, promiscuous woman. While you are pestering Hugo, you are also crawling into the bed of an old man. Leo, are you disgusting?" I was shocked in my heart, but I couldn't tell on my face. Well, of course, it's not as bad as someone who harasses someone and then gets angry and stares at someone else. Marcus, like our class secretary, before the consultation in the name of joining the group every day to pester people and even carry out some harassment behavior, the secretary could not bear with me confessed. I thought that Marcus would restrain himself when he had a boyfriend, but I rejected him. Refused when also just happened to be Marcus heard. The reason is that I like the male. The group's secretary later approached the counselor and educated Marcus a bit. The embarrassment of being poked and prodded mixed with the shame that the girl he liked me and the disgust that I was gay, and he began to verbally abuse me in various ways. Then one time in the dorms he got so dirty that Franklin heard him and got into a fight. Today, when I said that, he got angry again and raised his fist to punch me. I clamped his arm. "Marcus, is it that if I don't resist, you really think I'm a sick cat?" Since I was a child following Miles, he never gave me a break from the self-defense program. Although I grew up and slacked off, but I can still fight. Only Marcus is not a good person, you and me, fighting fiercely, the counselor came. After educating the two of us, he left me behind and mumbled for a moment, Leo, things have been urgent on Miles' side lately, so he might not be able to take care of your side. I froze. I know. I won't tell him about today's incident, and you try to be a good boy and don't cause him any more trouble. Okay, thank you, teacher. When I came out of the office, I saw Hugo's back. I walked towards him and he turned around and smiled at me. Leo, your teacher didn't hurt you, did he? I replied, you did, didn't you? What makes Leo think that? I stared at him for a long time and smiled. No one would do that but you, Hugo. Seeing that I was convinced, he simply stopped pretending. I did it, so what? Isn't it the fact that Leo abandoned me for Miles? But as long as Leo explodes his identity and tells me that he forced you to do it, I'll pretend this never happened and we'll still be a couple, okay? I looked at the man in front of me. Demure, ambitious. 1,000 miles away from the old cold and steady look. Hugo is joking, you don't like men, it's too much for you to be in a relationship with me. He froze, staring at me for a long time before he let out a deep laugh. Leo, you're smarter than I thought. But well, big brother doesn't talk about second brother, and it was never me you liked, was it? Seeing that I didn't say anything, he sighed in mock disappointment. I was thinking how devastated Miles would have to be if you agreed. But it doesn't matter. Without your step, he can't escape me. Really? Good luck then. He was not satisfied. Aren't you afraid I'll tell him what you just said and he'll be sad to know you're being so bland? I shook my head and laughed out loud at the thought. No, I trust him. Quote, just saying that, I've been trying to contact Franklin since I left. Time and time again, the call would only result in a busy signal. It was only when I couldn't get through to him that I started to look at Hugo's words in a positive light. If he was so sure, he must have gotten hold of something. For the first time, I hated myself for being so useless. If only I could be like Miles at this age, I could help. Thinking about it, I dialed Mom and Dad's number. The two of them were in a business marriage, and after they gave birth to me they went their separate ways, neither of them caring about me, only giving me my allotment on time. This was the first time I took the initiative to approach them. Although surprised, but at least it is a biological child, not much persuasion they agreed to help will help a hand. At the same time, I also began to investigate Hugo's business. In fact, I probably knew Hugo's purpose for doing all this. Franklin's family emphasizes morality, not to mention forcing others, or just like men this matter is enough to eat a pot of Hugo. But is Hugo always clean? I don't think so. Judging from the seamless succession of girlfriends after he broke up with me, or maybe not girlfriends, but just female companions, there must be something hidden under his seemingly clean skin. With this in mind, I commissioned a private investigator at a high price. But unexpectedly, I really let me shoot something. Hugo's name of the bar, as if in the do something unseemly hook. It's just that everything is conjecture, and there's never been any real solid evidence to photograph. And the PI didn't want to go any further. He pushed away the doubling of the payment, bitterly. Where is earning money as important as life? Sir, if you don't have a reason to go, you should also stop. Those matters of the big families are not for us to get involved in. If we continue to investigate, I'm afraid your life will be in danger. But I have to go. Franklin can't be contacted. Miles is too busy dealing with disputes to investigate Hugo's little maneuvers, so I'll go. As long as I got proof that he was doing these things and was of bad character, it would be enough to make him eat his words. So I entrusted the counselor with what I had in hand and gave it to Miles. He looked at me with a complicated expression and ultimately didn't say a word. That night, I received a call from the counselor. What came through was Miles' voice. Even if I couldn't see his expression, I could feel his intense fatigue just by listening to his voice. However, he still smiled. Leo, I received the evidence, thank you. I responded, no need to thank you, it's just a favor. He smiled deeply, and his low, hoarse voice was magnetized and transmitted again, only making people's ears tingle. Not to mention, he asked me seriously, Leo, did you miss me? I bit my lip and said, no. Who would miss you? I'm happy without you, no one to beat me, no one to discipline me, I can do whatever I want. His response was unexpected. Well, it's good to be happy. I paused and was about to look for a remedy when I heard him say, but I miss you. My ears became red all of a sudden, and even my fingers curled up unconsciously. It was only after a long time that I softly replied, then, I miss you too. Just as the words left his mouth, there was a crackle of movement over there. Someone was calling Miles' name, and he calmly arranged everything, and took the interval to ask me in a low voice, What did Leo just say that I didn't hear? I pursed my lips in displeasure. No, didn't say anything. There was another flurry of panic over there, and knowing he was busy, I lowered my eyes. Go ahead and go about your business. He responded softly and spoke again seriously. Leo, don't put yourself in danger, okay? I thought for a long time and whispered in response. His tone softened. Good girl, you're really good, wait for me, I'll be back soon. But the next day, I went to that bar in disguise. I changed into women's clothes and got my makeup done so I wouldn't be recognized. Sitting at the bar, I looked around. Until someone came to talk to me. Miss, would you mind going to the second floor with me? I scrutinized him for a long time and nodded my head in charity. The second floor is where only members can go up, and it's the place I was aiming for from the start. Once up there, I was greeted by a long corridor with private rooms on both sides. The man took me to the outermost one. Besides me, there were many men and women inside. I held my glass of wine for a long time, and when another pair of hands touched my leg, I finally, accidentally, failed to hold the glass steady. The liquid was heavy on my white dress, and it stood out. I smiled and withdrew, and went deeper into the box. But in the middle of someone cut off. What are you doing here? I'm going to the bathroom. He pointed around the corner. The bathroom's over there. I nodded in a daze and turned to the bathroom. As soon as the man left, I immediately leapt back out. Until I ran to the end and pushed the door open to go in. There was no one in there, so I grabbed a handful of papers and rummaged around for I don't know how long before I found one. I was happy to get up when the sound of the door opening came from the box. I happened to lock eyes with Hugo in the doorway. He raised one eyebrow and sized me up twice. Leo, it's been a while. I frowned and hid the papers behind me, but I was pinched by his bodyguard and pressed to death on the sofa. The file falls into Hugo's hands and he smiles softly as he opens it and places it in front of me again. Still happy with what you see? I looked up and my heart skipped a beat. The document I thought was important was empty. Having seen enough of me, he picks up my chin. Leo really surprised me, being able to do this for Miles. It's just a shame. He shook his head, his fingertips dropping to just above the knot of my throat and pressing down again gently. It looked like flirting, but I knew that if he pressed any harder, I wouldn't even be alive. I closed my eyes as if resigning myself to my fate. It was a bad move on my part, I admit it, but I want to know. Everything, was it all a setup by you? Everything? What do you mean? From approaching you, or letting you know about the bar? Or simply luring you in? I don't make a sound, and he doesn't need an answer from me. Approaching you was nothing more than curiosity to see what kind of person it would be to get Miles to like, but what a shame I couldn't pry you over to see Miles' reaction. As for the bar? He laughed out softly. I thought it was just an unsurprising trinket, but I didn't realize that, away from Miles, you'd be able to make it this far, so it's me who's being gullible. He moved closer again. You still threw yourself at me. You say, if I do something to you and then send it to Miles, will he go crazy and will he offer to give up all his assets to me? I'll be damned. You're delusional. Spit sprayed his face and he closed his eyes. The next second, he smiled dementedly and imprisoned my neck fiercely. The air was seized from my chest, my ears, my brain, my heart, my whole body screamed in pain. But I couldn't make a sound. I closed my eyes and tears fell from the corners of my eyes. The next second, the door slams. Light sprays in through the door, illuminating the area, along with me. Hugo was yanked away so hard I covered my chest and gasped for air. A large hand brushed against my back. patting it one at a time and taking my whole body into his arms again. It's okay, I'm coming. I opened my eyes and looked at the visitor. After such a long time of not seeing him, he has lost weight and has also changed a lot. I laughed out, Miles, I made it? He lowered his head, and his slightly grown stubble touched his face, a little solid, but I liked it. Zingy meant, not a dream. Satisfied, I reached out towards his face, not having time to touch the blackness before my eyes. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. Miles saw me wake up and was busy calling the doctor. After a quick checkup to make sure I was okay, I was able to get a good look at him. Is it all over? It's over. He took my hand and rubbed it gently against his face. Thank you, Leo. I laughed softly and didn't make a sound. I hadn't expected to get the papers that day. And my intention from the beginning was just to get him to admit it himself. The white dress looked like a gorgeous belt, but I had put a pinhole camera in it. Hugo is suspicious and arrogant, and only when he thinks he's in control will he be able to say anything without any burden. Luckily, I was right. For some time afterward, Miles took care of me in the hospital. I also saw Franklin, whom I hadn't been able to contact. As soon as he saw me, he pounced on me with a snotty nose and a tearful face. Leo, it's my brother, I'm sorry for you, I can't share your suffering. Miles pinched his collar and yanked him back. The iron face of Professor Gu caught him. The body subconsciously sat up straight. Good day, teacher. He nodded and hugged Franklin firmly. I blinked. I looked at him and then at Franklin. And then I saw the spot on Franklin's neck. I look away in embarrassment, waiting for them to leave before asking Miles, I didn't finish my sentence, but he understood what I meant, nodding his head. Guyao has liked him for a long time, and he went to your school as a teacher because of him. Then This time Franklin's family is not peaceful, so I got rid of Guyao to help me take care of Franklin. He spread his hands innocently. I just didn't realize that in such a short period of time, this kid had done everything he could. I was silent, secretly mourning for Franklin. If only he knew he'd been sold by his own brother-in-law. I shake my head. Miles handed me the peeled apple and stroked my head. Get some rest, you'll be out of the hospital by this afternoon. First thing after being discharged from the hospital, Miles took me to the school. Marcus had already been brought to the office, and when he saw Miles, he trembled, hung his head and apologized to me. I looked over at Miles. He put his arm around my shoulder and sighed, Don't worry, everything will be done according to the rules and regulations. Really? Really? I stared at him for a long time, but he was defeated. At best, I fought with him. What? I couldn't believe it. You fought him? Miles grunted proudly. As Leo Lai's boyfriend, someone bullied my girlfriend like this, so what's wrong with me? When I said that, I didn't want to ask Marcus about it and turned red. Who promised to be your date? You. When did I say that? In my dream. I can't argue with that. But then let your dreams come true, my boyfriend. Now he was the one who froze. What did you say? I looked away. I won't say it twice. He kissed me. One kiss wasn't enough, but he picked me up and spun me around several times. I didn't let go until I was dizzy and patted him on the shoulder. He hugged me tightly, and for the first time in his life, the steady man was so hasty. I'm sorry, I've made you feel bad. I covered my chest and shook my head. Miles, how old are you? You're more of a brat than I am. I'm just so happy, it's like a dream. As the words fell, the sun set in the sky, blossoming into a haze of light and shadow through the trees. I stood on tiptoe. It's not a dream, Miles. Lips pressed together, blurring the words, I like you too, always have.